Welcome to the Daily Boogie.
All right, let's get into it. Thanks for joining us. Racist to the core, ladies and gentlemen. This is in the Daily Mail Australian. Outrage as nurses are subject to a new code where they must announce their, quote, white privilege before treating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients. This may make hospital waiting rooms even more time-consuming. Imagine you come in with a gunshot. You're a unassuming Aboriginal gentleman. You've been mugged, obviously by a white person. You're in the hospital, and rather than crowbarring that bullet out of your gut, we must first sit you down and explain our white privilege to you. Just to make sure we tick all the cultural sensitivity boxes, whilst your innards and litres of blood just flow onto the floor. This is very practical. Australian nurses and midwives are being forced to announce their white privilege before treating Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander patients, a move which has been slammed as racist to its core. The term white privilege defines the unearned social and cultural advantages awarded to people with white skin, which are not enjoyed by people of colour or non-white backgrounds. The Nursing and Midwifery Board believes the cultural safety of Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander patients is just as important as their clinical safety. Again, that's up for debate. I guess it would be determined by the level of clinical safety that's being offered. Just say you've had your arm severed off in some kind of factory accident. Is your cultural safety at that moment in time more or just as important as your clinical safety? I'm not sure. Hopefully never have to find out either. Daniel Barron, thanks for joining us. Everyone should follow Daniel Barron, by the way. Doing a great new show, The Daniel Barron Show. Saturday night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. He's a great host, great conversationalist. You always have a good time on Daniel Barron's channel. So give him a follow. Pinky CLC says, I rarely see white nurses. That's very convenient. That's a problem solved. If we could just get rid of the white nurses altogether, then we wouldn't have to go through all this malarkey. I mean, let's think practically. Graham Haycroft, spokesperson for the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland, told Sky News the addition to the Code of Conduct could have serious consequences for nurses and is simply racist. The board describes the move as, quote, a decolonising model of practice based on dialogue, communication, power sharing and negotiation, and the acknowledgement of white privilege. I don't know. Call me crazy. I would love to be educated on this, obviously. We must all be aware of our privilege. Be made aware of it if we're not aware of it. I've been led to believe that part of having white privilege is not knowing how privileged you are. So I would very much appreciate if someone could come in, instruct me on my privilege, tell me how I can, best manoeuvre myself, my rapport with people in the wider world. How do I interact in the wider world whilst remaining mindful of my privilege at all times? Going to need a little tip there. So please, anyone, you're welcome to. Let me know. But the board, like the rule makers, they describe it as a decolonising model of practice based on dialogue, communication, power sharing and negotiation and the acknowledgement of white privilege. Again, might be just my white privilege, but I would have thought it's perhaps a little too late for decolonisation. And I'm not sure that a hospital emergency room is necessarily the best place to facilitate a decolonisation model. I mean, maybe if we could go back a couple of 100 years and uncolonise, I think that one, you know, maybe there's some value in that. But hospital waiting rooms, we're trying to decolonise through dialogue and power sharing and negotiation. Oh, well, you got to have dreams. Got to have dreams. Mr. Haycroft said 50% of NPAC members were opposed to the new rule. Only 50%. They said, quote, "This is wrong, do something about it." Mr. Haycroft told host Peter Credlin. The inclusion of white privilege in the Code of Conduct was first exposed by Cory Bernardi's Australian Conservatives. Senator Bernardi heavily criticised the move, labelling it as another virtue signal and nonsensical. Let's have a little look at the chap here.
We put a little survey on our website, that's npaq.com.au, and we asked nurses whether they supported our fight in this or whether they agreed with the Code of Conduct. Just over 50% of our members, and Pete, we're quite tiny, we're only 2,500 members, but it's a pretty representative sample. 50% of our members have said, this is wrong, do something about it, fight it for us. We put a little survey.
One can only assume that the remaining 50% are either not white and therefore don't have to announce any kind of privilege, or they're just simply racists. I mean, what other conclusion can a rational person come to? Just Nazis in the hospital. Quote, "This is just another example of where PC and this identity politics has captured the professional class or the political class," he told 2GB. "I can't recall one complaint that white privilege hasn't been acknowledged during the birth process." "Listen here, Doc. Before I pump this little bugger out, acknowledge your privilege." "We're going to need a privilege scalpel stat." "Nurse! Nurse!" "Yes, what is it, doctor? We got a code red." "Is someone dying?" "No. There's an American Indian in the room and you need to acknowledge your white privilege." Boom! Following the backlash, the board released a statement which said the codes required midwives and nurses to acknowledge that Australia has always been a culturally and linguistically diverse nation. Medical staff are also asked to consider the impact historical factors such as colonisation have had on Indigenous people's health. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, if you had dreams of working in the Australian health industry, you're going to need to learn a few things. You're going to need to learn about personal hygiene, for one. It's very important to wash your hands. Always make sure you wash your hands. You're going to have to learn procedural things like where to put, the drip bag, for example, where the medicine goes. You're going to have to learn the code that the doctors speak in, ECGs and EKGs and all of that stuff. And you're also going to have to pick up a history book so you can put the patient's mind at ease with your knowledge of cultural, historical factors and an acknowledgement of your white privilege. Medicine in the 21st century. It's amazing what they can do, isn't it? Simply amazing.